I'm coming to you from Philadelphia, from my office at Settlement Music School, and I really look forward to this discussion being interactive. I invite you to ask questions or share thoughts at any point. We have two members of Settlement staff here today with me. Megan Luby is our Director of Marketing and PR, and Jackie Feynman, who's Settlement's Gift Officer. And I'm absolutely thrilled to see that we have two board members here today, including the chair of our board, Ellen Friedel, and Phil Korb. So welcome. I actually wanted to start off by asking a question where people are coming to us from, because that will certainly help the conversation. So could you please enter in the chat where you're coming from and what your industry is? Where do you work? We'll just take a minute. It would be so great to hear from everybody. And you can even turn off your microphone, turn on your microphone and share as well. Oh, wonderful. Pittsburgh and Canada, Vancouver Island. Thank you all so much. It's really wonderful to have you here. And yes, Bettina is joining us from Munich, which is fantastic. And we already had a great discussion, and I really appreciate Bettina being our moderator here today. So I wanted to start off, for those of you who are not coming to us from the US, just to give a sense of what an American Community School of the Arts is. I know that these presentations have a long shelf life, that we have viewers from all over the world. And so I'd like to make sure that I explain the basics of what a Community School of the Arts is in the United States. First, it's important to share that there is so little government funding for the arts in the US that it's almost not even worth talking about. We are all private institutions that, in the best of worlds, we supplement what is offered in our schools for our children. But more frequently than not, we are the only opportunities that students have to engage in the arts. We are destinations for everyone to learn the arts, all races, religions, ages, and economic levels. Earned revenue is only ever a portion of the funds that we need, as we provide extensive financial aid to our students. And so we invest in fundraising with a team of people on our staff and with the help of our volunteers through their board service, as to our board members here today. We fundraise with companies, foundations, individuals, and through events. Currently at Settlement, this is about 45% of our revenue. So some basics about Settlement. We are what we call a legacy institution. We were founded in 1908, and so we're 113 years old now. We have branch locations across the Philadelphia region and now online. We own 5 large buildings, and we're deeply invested in the importance of developing neighborhoods through property ownership. We provide over 10,000 weekly services. And as we have shared in our description earlier, we provide over $2.6 million in financial aid every year, and that's to 60% of our students. We provide music, dance, creative arts therapy for students of all ages. We have an award-winning arts integrated preschool program. So before I move on, I just want to see whether there are any additional questions. Oh, you love tubas. That's fantastic. We actually have a picture, hopefully for you later, of a wonderful tuba teacher that we have here at Settlement and a young girl playing tuba. And we're actually thrilled, for the very first time in American Symphony Orchestra, in the Philadelphia Orchestra, there's a female tubist. And she's just wonderful, and I've heard her talk. So that's really delightful to hear. So the session topic for today is about curiosity, customer service, and collaboration as keys to creating a culture of innovation, especially during a challenging time. So how do we think about innovating at a legacy institution like Settlement? So I've been the CEO since 2010, and I realized very quickly, even before I accepted the position, that Settlement had to take a close look at what our communities needed from a 21st century community school of the arts. So I asked myself the question, how do we bring in much needed change and still honor the mission that has sustained and enabled the institution to thrive over the past 113 years? How do we honor the dozens of people who have taught for Settlement for over 25 years, some even over 50 years, and at the same time move forward this venerable institution. For decades, Settlement delivered consistent, reliable results, access to the highest quality arts instruction by outstanding teaching artists who are mostly classically trained. As an organization, we were hardwired to maintain and extend that success model, which we no doubt have done. And as a consequence of continually focusing on that reliable and predictable success, Settlement's administration was not encouraged to explore deviations or extensions of that core business model. Settlement was also not encouraged to move out of the box, albeit a very large box that the Philadelphia musical ecosystem had put us in. So essentially, a reliance on the tried and true was keeping the school from accessing new stakeholders, new students, and new revenue sources. Following the core business model allowed Settlement to ensure and anticipate results. So to help the encourage of the diversification of revenue sources, diversification of activities, and ultimately help us become more efficient and more effective as an institution, we had to look for new models. We saw that inspiring innovation at all levels of Settlement could allow us to continue to deliver consistent and successful results from our core business, while at the same time encourage investment in extensions and innovations. We realized that we needed to capitalize on our untapped resources, the natural curiosity of our people, our desire to provide top-level customer service, and our ability and already established extensive network that we had developed to collaborate. So in the process, we have learned how to innovate at our legacy institution without ever losing sight of our mission and, in fact, enhancing our mission-based work. So I'd like to ask the question now about why a community school of the arts is so well poised to innovate. So the obvious answer is creativity. When we think of artists, we tend to immediately think of creativity. But on a more granular level, the problem-solving techniques, detail-focused listening, and collaborative spirit that my colleagues at Settlement bring to their work reflects the very skills we work to instill in our students of all ages. When faced with a novel problem, we delve into the smallest possible details, just as a musician would analyze the slightest difference between notes in a scale. So for our musicians on the call, I know that you can relate to this, especially our drummer who's on the call. In working with our communities, we listen as intently as a player checks their tuning. That listening still comes down to not listening to respond, but listening to understand, which is something that artists are taught from a very young age. And we approach our partnerships as members of an orchestra or a dance company, each member playing their part to support one another in presenting something that is greater than the sum of its parts, the truest spirit of collaboration. But these qualities are not exclusive to musicians. I believe they can be adopted by anyone and used to create a dynamic, creative culture at any organization. So I'll pause for a second and see whether there are any additional comments or questions. I'm going to have a question coming up for you in just a moment. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Terrific. So before I launch into curiosity, I want to share with you that we have had a truly incredible opportunity over the past 9 years. At different points over this time, we have worked with Innov8rs, the global innovation firm. They've offered us consulting pro bono, and it has been transformational for us. One of the many lasting changes that Innov8rs brought to us was the concept of the job to be done. So according to Innov8rs, the job to be done is an approach based on the observation that people don't simply buy products or services, they hire them to get important, unsatisfied jobs done in their lives. At Settlement, when we come up against an obstacle or we're contemplating the risk of something new, we like to approach the obstacle with curiosity. Instead of saying, we can't do this because it's never been done, we ask, what is the job to be done? And what are the barriers that we need to overcome to get there? What need is this fulfilling for our customer, or our students and our families? This kind of thinking can only be rooted in curiosity. So now I'm going to fast forward to February 2020. I had the great fortune of having a father who works at the National Institutes of Health. And he told me that something world-altering was about to happen with the pandemic, and that we were in this for the very long haul. So we got started immediately, even weeks before settlement in Philadelphia closed for all in-person activity. We realized that this was the time to lean into our customers, our students, and get them engaged quickly and easily as possible. So I'll get back in just a moment to the students who were enrolled at settlement, but we also saw that all of the families in the Philadelphia region, we consider them all part of our settlement community. We were so curious about what the job to be done would be for our families as school closed, children were at home, and all the social interactions children and adults were used to having would be so drastically altered. So we decided even before we closed that we should offer free programming. We launched a Settlement Live series on Facebook, focusing on kids programming and adult programs as well. We truly believe that we are in service to our community, even if community members who watch our free programming are not paying customers. This raised our visibility in Philadelphia, the 6th largest city in the US, and our Kids Live won the Best of Philly, which is a coveted award here in our region. And it benefited the marketability of our paid programming overall, and we had 31,000 views for our Kids Live series. So I have a question for you now. What has been one area in your work that has improved during the pandemic as a result of being curious? There's our tuba photo. Please feel free to unmute yourself and join in. Anything that caused curiosity in all of you? I'm okay with pausing and waiting a minute. I might turn to one of my colleagues here on the call. Megan, I'm hoping you could share a thought on this.
Actually, Janine, I'm not sure whether I pronounced your name correctly. She said, I've been able to participate in a very high volume of educational and networking events like this. Never possible during regular times when you had to go in person. And Jacqueline says, having the opportunity to get to know some of our donors through in-depth conversations. And Janine, again, it says sort of on her comment about being able to participate in educational and networking events that she really hopes that it is there to stay after the pandemic. And Paul said mindfulness at a distance, which I think is very beautiful.
Janine, I have to say that we have definitely experienced this at settlement. I mean, never would I have thought that prior to doing this, I could be reaching people from all over the world so easily. And now we just feel like we have this all down. When we did our very first virtual learning opportunity, there was so much prep that was involved at settlement behind the scenes. And now we feel like we really have the hang of it. And we've met new friends literally from all over the world as a result. Oh, Janine, you're making me really happy. And in a moment, we're going to share with you why you can study violin at Settlement Music School here in Philadelphia. So that would be fantastic. And I have to say, I'm a violist by training. I went to Juilliard as a young person, and I'm married to a violinist. And so I absolutely understand the love of the violin. And one of our staff members here on the call, Jackie, is a pianist. And so she can certainly advocate for learning piano, but let's start with violin. So thank you very much for those thoughts. So moving on to customer service. So we were serving our community, and we also had to make sure to provide the best possible customer service to our own families. It was essential that they feel we were here for them during this pandemic. So first, who are our customers? They are our students who range in age from 6 months to 92 years, and they are our donors. One of the services that an institution like ours provides in the US is connecting these two groups. Donors who want to make an impact through creative arts education can achieve that through settlement. And students who cannot afford creative arts education can access it through settlement because of our generous donors. In essence, our customers are not just individual students, but the community as a whole. Plus, donors are often students or former students. Students grow to deeply care about our mission and become donors, or their parents see the impact of our work and become our donors. With our students, we're not cultivating just a single transaction. We're not just offering lessons. We are creating a lifetime pathway in the creative arts. We actually had a donor who passed away recently, started as a student in the 1920s, which was amazing, and stayed engaged with the school this entire time, our dear Leonard Melman. So by creating a home for our students, we encourage loyalty, long-term participation, and excellent word of mouth. We have a great reputation, both locally and nationally. So going back to the pandemic, so in those last few weeks before we closed our doors for in-person instruction, we realized that our entire business model of this in-person instruction had to be changed. We needed to identify creative ways to continue our operations. And the question then became, how do we continue to serve our students when we are all disconnected and when many of our students' families have even lost their livelihood? As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, several weeks prior to us closing for in-person teaching, we started planning, and within days, we had 170 musicians trained in distance learning and up online. We developed a tech team of 15 staff members who started training faculty even before we closed for in-person teaching. We had faculty members who had never even turned on a computer before or used the internet. And these were outstanding teaching artists. They were just completely against the whole idea of using cell phones or computers. So they took a little longer than most of our faculty. We had computers safely delivered to their homes, and we coached them day after day until they got the hang of it. We became what you might call customer obsessed. We called every single family multiple times to understand every barrier to participation. We honored the diversity of our student population, and we translated our distant learning handbooks into 6 languages and put them up on our website for easy access. We offered lessons both live and recorded so that we could try to accommodate every student's situation, and we created new ways of communicating quickly and effectively about issues that needed to be addressed. We worked tirelessly to remove all barriers for student participation. So now, imagine it's April 2020. So we've been closed for in-person teaching for about a month, and we're thinking nonstop about what opportunity is before us in our new virtual world and how we can serve more families and as effectively as possible during a pandemic. Our CFO recognized the cost savings of not having our buildings open, which was a huge opportunity to reallocate funds. What would have been spent on building overhead could now be put towards an increased investment in digital marketing. And as a result, a new service line, Settlement Music Online, was created, which now serves over 200 students in 17 states and is poised to grow even further. And we just got our first international request for lessons, and I have to say, our customers are really happy. So Janine, as you can see, you can sign up for violin lessons, and we have teachers who are experts at this, experts at teaching online. So I have a question for all of you. I was hoping that you could share an example of an experience during the pandemic where the customer service was so outstanding that you may become a lifelong customer. Something that was truly memorable for you. You couldn't quite believe that people stepped up at this level. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. I just sort of jumping in. I have, after 31 years in the UK, I have just moved to Germany in March, and I thought that the whole transfer was quite stressful because I wasn't quite sure whether I was doing something illegal by being on the road in times of lockdown, and had to sort out my my registration here in Munich before they could deliver my furniture, because of course England has left the EU and there's sort of all sorts of problems. And I have to say I was just hugely pleasantly delighted with the service that I got from the authorities here in Munich in terms of their support and their responsiveness. So, I'm definitely a fan of which I never thought I would say of any authority, any bureaucratic institution, that I'm a big fan of all the institutions that I have encountered here in Munich.
It's great to hear, Bettina. I hear we have, unfortunate to say, Amazon. So Amazon has certainly capitalized on providing good customer service. We actually asked this question to our board members. We have a large board and they're so knowledgeable and they bring so much to our organization because we really wanted to understand how our customers might be thinking. Many of our board members are actually students. And we were really inspired by what we heard about what customer service really means to people, especially during a pandemic, and how we could really change how we operate to be responsive to that. And hopefully people who have experienced settlement have definitely felt that. It's mattered a lot to us. Are there other experiences people have had? Anything special that you can remember? I have to say that even some of our board members were sharing things as simple as going to their favorite restaurant and how they were practicing all the proper social distancing and cleaning and everything and delivering their food right to their car and how much they appreciated that. And it has made them lifelong customers for many restaurants and, of course, supporting the restaurant industry. Oh, here we go. I live in France, so you have to understand the level is quite low, but my internet supplier switched out my box and had a new one delivered the same day. Whereas in the normal world without lockdown, this would have taken 1 week and required me to go to them. That's a great example. I have to say Comcast is based out of Philadelphia, and they did something really amazing here, which was they offered free internet to low-income families. So as soon as the pandemic hit, all of the Philadelphia students had access to internet through Comcast. And that really meant a lot to us. So I definitely can understand. We have not been able to afford any of our internet not working. And I also want to say to the French person, Chris, who's joining us, my husband is French. And so we definitely know what you're talking about at times. All righty. So I'd like to finish up my initial presentation talking about collaboration, which is actually one of my favorites. So just to set the stage, I want to share that our greatest innovation at Settlement, in my mind, has happened through collaborations. We have seen the impact of our reach on both a national level through these partnerships, and also now seeing it at times even on an international level when we get to present at a special unconference like this. Our most widely recognized partnership, which is one of the most dynamic and interesting ones that we have in our field, is the Philadelphia Music Alliance for Youth Artists Initiative, or we use the acronym PMA. Philadelphia and Settlement's 8 partner institutions were the first in the country to receive a multi-million-dollar grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation out of New York City to identify and support students from underrepresented communities who wish to become professional classical musicians. Underrepresented in the field of classical music in the US are African Americans, Latinos, South Asians, and students who come from low-income families. All 9 organizations on paper could be considered competitors, competing for donors, for students, and for visibility. However, together with the Mellon Foundation as partners, we identified a serious issue for the future of classical music: its lack of diversity, its lack of representation of the people who make up the United States at the professional level, both on stage, in administration, and also in the boardrooms and in our audiences. We have no lack of diversity at Settlement Music School. However, as students go through this pathway, there is less and less diversity as they aspire to become professional classical musicians and reach the collegiate level. So we decided that the only way to address this was to work together to make systemic change. Change that is not just the result of one leader and one organization, but change that is citywide, change that has inspired other major cities in the US to do the same. So we currently have a cohort of 70 students. We're in our 4th year of this project. We've already graduated 34 students from underrepresented communities who've gone on to major music schools and conservatories around the US. We share resources, we share knowledge, we meet on a regular basis, we share all the information about the students, and we do everything in the best interest of the students, which is really unusual in our field, especially, as I said, if you can imagine us on paper as competitors. So something really extraordinary has happened, and we are starting to see systemic change here in the city and nationwide as a result. And we're enormously proud of this. And so for me, this is some of our most innovative work, and it can only be done when you work in collaboration. And something else that we've noticed that has thrived during the pandemic is how much our PMA students would practice. So when there's nothing else to divert their attention, it's just amazing how much the kids have progressed. So we've been really pleased about that. So I'd like to pause now and here's some wonderful pictures of our students up on the screen and see if people have questions. And we also have more questions for all of you.
I don't know, Helen, whether you can see a question. And, you know, Janine, am I pronouncing your name approximately right? Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Well, if you can unmute yourself, please ask your question, then I don't have to read it out. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, that's an amazing coalition of 9 organizations, especially if you're deemed competitors in general. How did you catalyze, how did you catalyze and secure that coalition?
That's a great question. So in Philadelphia, we had already started working collaboratively. And so it wasn't so unusual for us to get together and share best practices. We had already kind of set the tone, but this, of course, took it to a whole new level when you get a partner like the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation coming in and willing to invest millions in this project. And so we started off with getting together, everyone acknowledging that there was a serious issue with the lack of diversity in classical music, and that we would create shared values. And some of those shared values included the importance of putting the students first, of truly working as a team, to work as a family. And I think the process of developing those core values really set us on the right path. Plus, Settlement is the re-granting entity. We're the lead partner, but we really do use a shared leadership model. And it's something that I actively practice at Settlement in my own work as well, in addition to all the work I've done with PMA. So this idea that everybody's voice, every single voice matters, and that we take the time to check in and really see how each organization is doing. So I would say that that was really the genesis of it.
Actually, Helen, may I just jump in there right away and follow up, because I really love the idea of this shared leadership model. How did you introduce it, and what was the journey of introducing it? What was the reaction? Was everyone embracing it readily, or was it, well, hang on a second, I'm supposed to make my own decisions. What about the shared leadership stuff? So how did you go about that?
Sure. So I would say it's something that I started really early on in my career, that when you are a young woman coming into a field, even our field has been mostly led by men, and you really want to make sure that you are responsive to everybody and that your staff members understand and your faculty understand that you're in service, then you're already in the mindset. And what I would say when I came to Settlement, I was following an executive director of 30 years who had done a phenomenal job for the school. I'm only the 6th executive director in 113 years You had better show up being ready to listen. You had better show up wanting to understand what is most important to the school. I often call leadership an exercise in patience. You may come in and you may want to make a ton of change, but actually the change that we're describing really happened over a long period of time. And that it was through talking with the staff, really understand, really listening, that we got to together make decisions about what settlement needed. And it was so effective that we continue to do it. And so I have two wonderful colleagues on the call, and I look for their advice all the time. I would say that through the pandemic, every communication that has come out from settlement has been fully vetted by Megan Luby. And I am enormously grateful for that, because it's so important to have these perspectives.
Wonderful. There's also just stepping back for a moment again, because Paul was asking about, can you give me an example of a JDBD innovation which was significant?
Oh, so job to be done. Is that right, Paul?
Oh, that's
we love our acronyms at Settlement Music School.
Yes.
Paul,
yes,
I have to say, I have been so influenced by Innov8rs and so grateful for all the work they've done with us that I'm steeped in innovation and Innov8rs talk, but I haven't quite used the acronym before. Let's see, can you give me an example of a job to be done innovation which was significant? I would say that Scott Anthony, one of the partners of Innov8rs, wrote about this in 2014 in Harvard Business Review. And so it was in 2012 that Innov8rs started working with us, and we brought in about 10 members of the staff from all different areas of the organization to work together to understand what it meant to really act upon this idea of jobs to be done. And so for 9 months, they worked with us to learn how to ask the right questions. That's sometimes the hardest part. What are the actual questions? It's not just, do you want to take this music lesson at settlement? It's about what is meaningful to people, what really brings people relaxation, how they want to engage, and above all, why. So we broke up into teams on the staff at settlement with our consultants from Innov8rs. And look at that sweet baby who's joining us. I can't help but notice. And I have to say, Paul, that what we did is we went out into our communities and we started interviewing a number of our parents who had not signed up for music lessons before. And we asked them about what was completely relaxing for them. And lots of people gave notes and shared ideas that had nothing to do with music, but they talked about, well, going to the gym and I get to see friends at the gym and I really enjoy that. Or I love going to, happy hour at this bar and, reconnecting with some of my college friends. And through that, we actually developed a whole adult rock band. And it was an opportunity for our adult amateurs to reconnect with something that they had experienced in their youth, to reconnect with those college friends, to do something totally different from their profession and bring them together. And this program is hugely successful. And we are so thrilled at how much people have really taken to it and how our adult students really want to learn, how they want to connect with other people. And so we didn't immediately think adult rock band. We thought, what is it that will really make a difference in someone's lives? And that's what developed out of it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Are there any more questions that have come up from Helen's wonderful presentation? Because I got lots of insights out of it. Well, maybe maybe some of the insights might trigger some thoughts for you. Basically, when you started off, Helen, I thought it was so important, and it's something that I feel is so often ignored, is that when you start to change something, that you start by honoring and respecting what has been and what is. And I think that is just so often ignored, and people just rush in and want to change stuff, and thereby stepping on everyone's toes on everyone's toes who has put in place what is currently there. So, how did you, is that normally the way you do things, or you said you were just very aware? So what, was that an approach that came to you naturally, or had you an earlier experience maybe in your professional life that made you really realize how important that approach is? So because I don't think it's the standard approach, hence I'm curious what enabled you to take this approach.
My mother actually always shared with me a wonderful quote. So I grew up hearing this, you have to imagine. I've heard it so many times. She always said, Helen, you can't enlist as a general. And so as much as I had these big ideas and everything that I wanted to do, she would remind me regularly that you really develop as a person, you develop as a leader. And if you don't learn from the people around you, you're making a huge mistake. And so I really started off in this profession, I think, doing a great deal of listening. I think I truly have a growth mindset. I'm a lifelong learner. And I think when you start with that, that is what is so critical. And then I think when you come to an institution like Settlement, where there is such deep love by everyone involved in the school, I think you have to approach your work with a great level of empathy. And I fundamentally understood that people were so nervous when I got here. Because they were so used to Settlement being approached in a certain way. And another thing that I share frequently is that the most important thing that a leader can do when they first start off working at an institution is to find something authentic, something that's true about where you work, something that and that's wonderful, right? That you can share with people, and they start to believe that you're really understanding what is most important. We often call it drinking the Kool-Aid here in the US. And I drank the Kool-Aid really quickly at Settlement. And what I noticed immediately was that there was a culture of kindness. It permeated everything. I inherited the most wonderful culture of kindness. And so when you start with that and you share with people what you're seeing truthfully, not just using great exaggerations just to get them to like you, but I stayed focused on this idea of a culture of kindness, then they were willing to open up about what was most important to them. And then what goes hand in hand is that when you're going to make change, you need to be the one to tell the person if you know that person is not going to benefit by the change. So when hard decisions have to be made, don't send it in an email. Don't just call someone on the phone. Have that person sitting across the table from you so that they understand that you feel their anxiety, maybe even their pain and their disappointment. And don't shy away from that. And I think those were some of the initial ways that I approached leading Settlement.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. And I just check in whether there is, I know that Paul also had a question about developing a customer journey map, whether you developed some. So actually, did you develop one when you entered the organization, or have you been working with customer journey maps a lot? Was that part of the Innov8rs approach that you have been using?
So first of all, I love the name, a customer journey map. I think that's really cool. And I'm sure Megan right now is writing that down. We have not done customer journey maps, perhaps the way you're thinking about it, Paul. But what we have done is acknowledge the fact that Settlement is a very large institution and is complicated. And studying music, we have a huge jazz program, we have a rock program, we have lots of different programs, but studying music is complicated. And there's a whole path to do this. We call it our pathway. Similar to what I was sharing with Pime, there's a whole learning that has to happen with families who are not familiar for how to train and teach a child in music. And so we actually worked really hard over the past several years under Megan's leadership to create a pathway so that our students could understand when they first started the school, they might sign up for early childhood programming, then they can take private lessons, then ensembles are available to them and other special programs. And it's actually up on our website. And this was also developed with our Director of Education, Karen Ornstein. And so we put a lot of effort into this to try to demystify studying, especially classical music. And I think we've done a really good job of it, that classical music can be for everyone. Often people talk about classical music not being such an interest anymore in the United States, and it is absolutely not true. Or we would never provide 10,000 weekly services, which is mostly classical music. People really do want to study the piano and the violin.
Yeah, that reminds me of something else that you said about, doing what you have always done basically never allows you to open up new markets. And I think it is really, allowing or taking a different perspective, offering a different side, using a different approach to open up markets that, if you keep doing the things that you have done, we would never have been able to access. That also brings me to another question, which is, do you think it always requires, you came in as a new person after someone had been there for a long time. So do you believe that it requires a new person to come in if change is necessary? Or do you think it can happen from within the existing structure, the existing organization?
Oh, I absolutely think it can still come from within the organization. I'm a huge believer in working with our very talented staff members and finding opportunities for them to grow within their positions. I think in this case, it was the board's decision, and they felt that I was the right candidate for the position. And I actually moved from Chicago. I was working in a similar field to settlement. But as I think about the future of settlement, I absolutely think that there are people who are developing as incredible leaders for the school. And because of this shared leadership model, they have an enormous impact on settlement.
And so how did you go about introducing the topic of innovation? How did you, did you guide people on the path of change?
So I love that question. And something that I share often, because I feel like it works especially well in nonprofits and especially well in legacy institutions, is that Innov8rs shared with us early on that we should break down our work, that 50% into these buckets. 50% of our time should be spent on what they call our core programming. How is it that people understand Settlement Music School? What is it we've been doing for 113 years so well? And that 30% of our time should be spent on extensions of our core. So take our programming, and for us, it was taking it beyond our branch doors and developing community partnerships. And 20% of our time should be spent on innovation. That we should not be spending 80% of our time on innovation, that we should be spending 20%, that it was truly the right amount. And because I actively spoke of this at all opportunities I was given with staff, with our faculty, with our board members, nobody got too anxious about the innovation side of things. I said, just 20%. Innovation is important, but 80% of our efforts are still going to be invested in how people understand settlement best. So I think that really allowed people to relax, to really listen, because they weren't afraid that I was fundamentally changing the school. And then there was one other exercise that we did that I'm a huge fan of called Future Back. And that is that and so I see great smiles from you, Bettina, and it really works. And you must know that it's kind of incredible how well it works. And it's the idea with strategic planning that you actually envision how the world could change. What are those jobs to be done 5 and 10 years from now? And by talking about something that is further out in the future than the people who are deeply invested in what is happening exactly today in this moment at your institution, it really opens up their minds, because all of a sudden they think, oh, 10 years from now, that's so far from now. I don't have to worry about it. I'm not the person who's going to be required to do it, or, who knows, I might not even be here. Well, lo and behold, almost everybody is still here 10 years later at settlement, but it enabled people to think really creatively. And even one of our faculty members 10 years ago when we launched Future Back. This is a faculty member who never wanted a cell phone or a computer until the pandemic hit, was the one talking about technology and the importance of technology for the future of settlement. I kid you not. And so it really opened up all of our minds, and we did some of our most creative work around this. So I would say that this framework has really been essential to how we've grown as an institution.
That is wonderful. I think you've already given us lots of tips on how to start a journey of change and innovation, such as go in respecting what's there, deep listening to understand, really focusing on the customer, working back from the future. And I just felt one of the things that is really important, while you emphasize the customer satisfaction, and it felt like it was the external one, I felt that you paid equal attention and listening and empathy to the internal customer, i.e., everyone inside the organization. So, I mean, that's such a beautiful bouquet of things to consider when you want to introduce change. Is there, because I know our time is nearly up, is there one last thing that you might want to add to it?
Oh, goodness. I'm going to answer that question. I also want to make sure to respond to Janine, because I saw this comment. You refer to classical music, but it sounds like we've diversified. I actually have to say, Janine, we have a huge history in jazz as well at Settlement. Actually, Chubby Checker, Kevin Eubanks, Questlove, they all studied at Settlement, which is really cool. So I would say that there were other areas that we developed even more, like rock and bringing new dance forms and collaborations that we've done. We actually have a whole bucket drumming course now at Settlement, which is really cool in our partnerships. So going back to this question of the customer, I'm thinking about the comment before about the customer journey and really being attuned to overall how people are feeling about the school. One thing we take really seriously is to make sure that we are highly responsive to what our families want from us. And I mean, really giving the highest level of attention to any issues that come up with the school. And with our faculty, who are really the heart of Settlement, we approach our faculty with a service mentality, that we are truly in service to our faculty, that our administration would have no reason to even exist if it were not for our faculty. And I believe that our faculty feel that. And so what that has led to is a great relationship between our administration and our faculty, between our board and our faculty, because that they know that we work for them. And I have to say that's not always the case in arts institutions in the US. And sometimes the relationship can be contentious. But I believe when you bring on new people and you really teach them and train them in the core values of your institution, and you really teach them that we are in service, they apply that to everything that we do, being in service to the families, being in service to our students, being in service to our faculty. And so that's something that I care deeply about.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Helen, so much. I so enjoyed listening to you. I so enjoyed the interactions with the audience. So thank you very much for engaging, for bringing your questions, for contributing. And of course, there are more wonderful presentations to come in the Innov8rs Unconference. And I hope to see you in one of the others that I'm also having the pleasure to moderate. And for now, just a huge thank you to Helen and her team. Thank you very much for being here. It was absolutely interesting. And I wish you all a good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you all are. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Bettina. Thank you for having me.